Okay, let me ask you a question. Were you a good student? I would like to think I was, and even though my teachers may have never explicitly said it, I am pretty sure that I was one of their star pupils. And in some sense, I guess that's what this trip is all about. I am going to be visiting one of my star pupils as a reviewer. It's about like 1 o'clock right now, a.m., so I'm gonna hit the sack. I gotta start up early, I think, at around maybe 6:30, so I can get over there in time and get everything set up. But I will see you guys then. Okay, so I've just arrived at 64 Audio. I am here. So this is post-call gear to fill in some of the blanks. Basically, I got a tour of the whole facility and met a ton of team members. I think what struck me most though is the number of proprietary tools that 64 Audio employs. And I guess this is sort of what happens when you're a pioneer in the industry, but they have a lot of creative solutions that they've made from scratch. A couple that come to mind are custom attachments to measure CIMs, a machine to measure the number of actuations that a connector pin will sustain, and a Python algorithm to create matched pairs between drivers and to find golden samples. The algorithm one is probably the coolest one to me just because 1, I'm a data analyst, and 2, it's such a creative solution that probably wouldn't have occurred to a lot of other manufacturers. In fact, this is the first time I've heard of such a thing. All that being said, let's move to some quick interview footage and then listening impressions. Diving back into the idea of headphones, could you talk a little bit more about why your company hasn't approached headphones so far and maybe what makes IEM special to you?
Yeah, I would say I do have a special place for IEMs just because back in 2003 or 4, I bought my very first set. And I remember that feeling of just being so mesmerized by what's inside these little gummy things. There were silicone. And I remember the first thing I wanted to do was cut them open and figure out how are these little silver boxes producing sound, So me being a musician and I was also getting into engineering, so I was playing keyboards on stage and doing monitors for the band. Just IEMs just really captivated me. And ever since it was a pursuit of how do I, years later, it was about 2009 when I started to look into how do I make my own in-ear. But I mean, I'll use headphones in the studio and stuff like that, but I guess IEMs, to me, they're more challenging because we haven't seen anything more than about 2 drivers in headphones, right?
Right.
That I'm aware of. Usually it's single
Right.
transducer, but IEMs, if you try to crack one of our 18S that thing is just jammed with all kinds of goodies, right? And so I like that challenge. I like the challenge of taking something small or taking something complex and making it small and making it sound big. So
I love that dichotomy, that juxtaposition between the two.
I used to take my mom's watches apart when I was a kid because I was so fascinated by all the little gears and mechanisms. I could never put them back together, but I'm a sucker for small things.
Gotcha. Okay, so right now I am in what is probably one of the coolest rooms in this building, which is the listening room. They have access to pretty much every one of their models in this room, and as such, I'm going to be spending the next couple hours to go through and listen to all of them, including prototypes and some unreleased models. I'm not sure if I'll be able to share my thoughts on all of them. I know I won't be on some of them, but I'll do my best to share accordingly. Let's get to listening. Okay, check these out. These are the Elusive U3T. so I've spent about 20 minutes listening to these. I have to move on to other stuff, but it's hard to believe that this is using 3 balanced armatures. I think that generally when you think of these low driver count setups, 4 balanced armatures is right around, I think, the sweet spot where you start getting performance where you start hitting higher levels of performance like with the Helios. But the fact that the A3T is only using 3 balanced armatures and it's hitting, I think, I don't know, I'd say 90% of the U12T's target curve is just, it's pretty incredible. So if you want my actual sound impressions, I will say that this sounds like a watered down U12T. And I don't think that's quite doing it justice though. It has again, almost all of the tonal characteristics of the U12T that House 64 sound, but at the same time, it just doesn't quite have the U12T's incredible technical performance. It does still have fantastic dynamics, macro dynamics. I think that's something that pretty much all the 64 audio IEMs do very well. However, when it comes to resolution, I think that's where you're going to be noticing the biggest difference relative to something like the 12T. The imaging performance, again, I would say that the U12T has an edge. My guess is just because it has more contrast across the frequency spectrum. But the imaging on this is no slouch, and it's somewhere between, I guess, the 6T and the 12T. I know it might sound like I'm underselling this to some degree when I say it's like a watered down U12T, but the level of performance that this has is pretty remarkable. And I think blind, I would probably place it around, I don't know, maybe the $800, $900 mark. Anyways, moving along from the very excellent A3T, I want to finally give a listen to the A2E and the A3E, some of the lower driver count models in 64 Audio's lineup that might be more underappreciated. Okay, and over here I believe we have the A3E, the model that does not have the TIA driver, and it is just 3 balanced armatures. So, no words being minced, I think that this one is pretty mid. You can definitely tell that it doesn't have much extension past 10 kHz, and I feel like the mid bass on this is a little bit more bloated, and then I want to say that there's a peak at around 5 kHz, but it's a little bit hard to tell. The upper mids are kind of more pulled back, but overall this is more indicative of some of the limitations that I was talking about when it comes to these lower driver count setups. The resolution on this is just not that impressive to me, I guess, coming from the A3T. I'd probably put this around maybe the $100, $200 mark in terms of technicalities. It's really clear to me, at least, that the TIA driver makes a major difference when it comes to curating that house sound that 64 Audio has. Okay, and now this is the A2E, which is the bare bones entry-level model in the lineup. 2 balanced armatures, as you might infer from the naming convention. Yeah, so I've only been listening for a minute, and I can tell you that this more or less falls into the same bucket as the A3E. It's scaled back even further in terms of technicalities, and you can tell from at least tonally, it has less, I think, high frequency past 10 kHz. The upper mids are dipped even a bit more, and then it has even more mid bass. So it's just very, very dark and sort of recessed sounding in general. Really would not be my first choice at this price point. Okay, so I'm sure some of you are probably wondering, what is my obsession with low driver count setups? And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to this idea of juxtaposition. When you have a low driver count setup, there's usually this notion that there's only so much that can be achieved with that type of setup. But in essence, when a company is able to put out a 3 balanced armature, 4 balanced armature IEM that sounds as good as I don't know, a 10 balanced armature, 6 balanced armature, 12 balanced armature IEM, it's impressive. And to me, it is a measure of how well a company is able to work with what is often perceived as an inherent bottleneck. And again, it's just so cool seeing, or hearing rather, the amount of performance that you're getting out of such a small, compact balanced armature package. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of why I love these low driver count setups. Okay, so it's pretty close to being near the end of the day of the HQ tour, and I'm on the cusp of losing my voice. So I will talk a little bit about why 64 audio and maybe some concluding thoughts on my visit. And no, the answer is not that I secretly work for the brand and am paid to shill their products. Okay, jokes aside, I think that the main thing that attracts me to 64 audio, that sort of pulled me into the fold, of course, is the products that they put out. Obviously, I've since moved on from the U12T, but it stands that I always have a 64 audio IEM in my lineup. That sort of anchors me to this idea of the rest of the industry and what the rest of the industry is doing. I'm mostly speaking with respect to the bottom echelons of the market and Chi-Fi in general. And this is in the sense that a lot of these IEMs, they're aggregating on a very homogeneous sound. They all sound very similar. And what I like most about 64 audio is that they are not afraid to stick to their guns. They are not afraid to take unconventional, novel approaches to the way they tune their IEMs. Now, that reason aside, obviously it also comes down to the people at 64 audio. Just going through the rounds today, getting to meet everyone at 64 audio and being able to talk to Vitaly, the founder, well, both Vitalys, Philip, Albert, a bunch of the other guys, it was clear to me that they were very passionate about what they do, but two, they were also very transparent, I think is the word. That's the best way I can describe it. I'd like to think that I asked some, pretty spicy questions sometimes, and I also gave some pretty honest feedback about their IEMs, but I didn't feel like I had to walk on eggshells. I didn't feel like I had to hold back on my opinion, and I think that is one of the predominant things that is, in my mind at least, anchoring me to this brand and makes it one of my quote-unquote star pupils, if we want to go back to the analogy that I made at the beginning of this video. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this HQ tour, the listening impressions. I certainly had a lot of fun doing them, and be on the lookout for the full video on the Headphone Show channel, where we'll be going in depth on a lot of the questions that I asked, as well as some of the developmental processes at 64 audio. All right, I think that's gonna do it for this video. Precog out.